Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello. So here we are going to talk about TOEFL IBT listening test. So this presentation was presented by Rizki, Silvia, Ariyani, and Devita, Puji, Puspitasari. So what is IBT listening test? Listening varies in its length and number of questions due to the possibility of getting unscored experimental questions. The section can range from 60 minutes and 34 questions long to 90 minutes and 51 questions long. Listening tests you on your English listening skill. In total, if you listen to 4 to 6 lecture and 2 to 3 conversation, each lecture lasts 3 to 5 minutes and come with 6 questions, while each conversation lasts about 3 minutes and comes with 5 questions. So you will hear each audio clips only once. So here we are going to talk about the main ideas of types of IBT listening section. Then we are going to talk about the details, about the implication, the relationship between the ideas, and on the fifth we are going to talk about information of organization, and the last one we are going to talk about speaker's objective. So for the main idea, in every listening sample will begin in the same way with a main idea question. This question asks you to identify the main point of the lecture or conversation. So they usually take up one of the following forms. So the example of the question like, why does the professor ask to see the student? What problem does the student have? What is the main idea of the lecture? What subject is the professor mainly discussed? So when you see this kind of question, you have to remember that you should only be concerned with the main idea of the passage. Supporting ideas, example, and counter-example will not be correct answer. Just because the answer choice is true doesn't mean that it's the correct answer. It must be the most important of all correct answer choices. So this is the example of TOEFL listening lecture. So you will see the audio clips here, and you have to listen to it, and then you have to answer for the question. The question is like, what is the main point of the professional lecture? A. People today should know more about the different styles that particularly carried examples certain historical tendencies of the art world. C. We can never know the artists who might be popular in the future. D. Botticelli's religious painting were more important than his painting that despite it non-religious. Or it's like just like on the above, but you have to answer it. Then tips for answering main idea questions. So the first is you have to focus to the supporting ideas. Then if the question asked for the main purpose of conversation, the answer will be the beginning of conversation. And the next is go to the easiest question first. The next is detailed questions are roughly equivalent to the factual question from the TOEFL reading section. They deal with specific facts from listening section, but they are not usually as specific as detailed question in the reading section. So in detailed question in the listening section rarely deal with very specific information like numbers or name. Instead, they focus on those facts that you would recognize as important as you listen to the recording. So this is the example. So you will see audio clips or a video, and you have to answer for the question like, what problems does the student have? A. He received another student's tuition statement. B. He received a notice that his payment was late. C. He forgot to pay tuition during during a holiday week, or D, he has been barred from attending classes. And you will have to answer and give your explanation. The next is tips for answering detailed questions. So, as you choose the answer choice, be careful not to fall into a trap that false friends may set for you. False friends are answer choices that use the keywords from the passage in a way that appears to be correct, but isn't. They may directly contradict the information in the passage, or they may simply not make sense. So before you mark a final answer, revisit the main idea of the recording and make sure that your answer choices make sense considering the main idea. And the last is pay attention to the speaker, because there's no second chance to listen to the audio. So for the implication in this section, the main purpose of question is to make an inference of a passage. This type of listening question usually look very similar to one of this example, like what can be inferred from the professor's discussion? What will the student probably do next? What is implied in the speaker say this? So sometimes the question will replay a sentence from recording for you, and the other times you will need to rely on your notes and memory to answer the question. And unfortunately, your notes may not always be much help, since you can't take notes on information that isn't there. Here's our example of this question. So you have to listen to a conversation between a student and administrator at the university finance office. So the question is like, what can be inferred about the students? So here you have to answer for the question based on what you have heard. So here are the tips for answering the implication question. Number 1 is never pick an answer that contradicts a main idea from the passage. B, as you are listening, pay attention to the speaker's tone, and then the correct answer will probably use some keywords not found in the recording. The next is the information in the recording never draw from your own thoughts or experiences if they are not also spoken about in the recording. The next is the implication is very similar to what directly said. You do not need to make a large logical jump. So the next we will talk about the relationship between ideas. So this question is the second kind of organization question that will ask you about the relationship between two or more parts in the lecture. The second kind of relationship between new ideas question is the one that deals with relationship between various parts of the lecture. For example, the taste may ask you, how does the professor explain his theory about the causes of the war? So to answer the questions, you will need to look back at your notes and find the information that is relevant to that question. These questions are about the smaller relationship rather than the overall structure. Here's our example of the question. So you will hear or listen to an audio clip, and you have to answer the question based on what you've heard. But here you will not get the question that the question will not written in this section. So the next is about information of organization. So information of organization question tests your understanding of pragmatics, or the implied meaning that we get from the context. They will often ask about a very particular part of the passage, even just a single word. The question will replay a segment of recording that contains the topic of the question, and then will replay just the topic. There will be no transcription provided or any part of this question. All the information will be provided through listening. So do not deal with the meaning of the words the speaker said, but rather with the information that implied by how the speaker said them. So let's take a look at a partiality of general rhetorical function you may need to be able to identify. So here you will see a video or an audio, and you have to answer for the question. The next, I'll give you tips for answering information of organization. So you have to listen for signal that will help you understand the organization of a talk, connection between ideas, and the importance of ideas. And the next is about the speaker's objective. Speaker's objective question, like function question, often deal with information that given not just by what the speaker said, but also by how they say it. So they will ask you about the speaker's attitude, that is, what information the speaker's intonation and word choice give you about the speaker's feelings and relationship towards the subject she or he is discussing. So speaker's objective question may also ask you about feelings that are directly stated or strongly implied, as the following example. So for the example, we'll hear an audio and so this audio is a conversation between a professor and a student, and then later on you have to answer for the question. So here are tips for answering speaker's objective. The first one is keep the context of the conversation in mind. Then listen to as much natural speech as you can and pay attention to how intonation and vocal quality change with the speaker's mood. And the last one is learn to recognize nonverbal cues and combine them with the words that the speaker uses to understand exactly how the speakers feel. That's all from me. That's all from us. Thank you very much for your attention, and also wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.